In American history, moments when military leaders publicly challenge or distance themselves from political authority have often become defining tests of democratic resilience. The system is built on civilian control of the military, meaning elected officials ultimately direct the armed forces. Yet that control operates within constitutional boundaries and professional norms. When retired or senior leaders feel those norms are being strained, their public voice can signal to the broader public that something out of the ordinary is occurring. It does not automatically imply rebellion or insubordination. Rather, it can reflect a calculated effort to protect institutional integrity while still respecting legal authority. The rarity of such a step is precisely what makes it powerful. It disrupts expectations and forces citizens, lawmakers, and service members alike to pause and examine whether the long-standing balance between politics and the military is being maintained. The unusual nature of this public intervention also raises broader questions about precedent. If military leaders begin speaking out more frequently in partisan conflicts, it could gradually alter the perception of the armed forces as neutral guardians of national defense. That is why actions like this are typically considered last resorts. The leaders involved would likely understand that once the barrier of silence is crossed, it cannot easily be restored. Their decision, therefore, signals that they weighed the risks of remaining silent against the risks of speaking out, and concluded that silence carried the greater danger in this particular circumstance. One of the most foundational principles of the United States military is that it remains strictly apolitical. The armed forces do not belong to a political party, a campaign, or an individual leader. They belong to the Constitution and the American people. Every service member, from the newest recruit to the highest-ranking general, swears an oath not to a president, but to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. That distinction is not symbolic, it is the cornerstone of American civil-military relations. It ensures that power does not become personalized and that the military cannot be used as a partisan instrument. When concerns arise suggesting that this boundary may be blurred, it triggers serious reflection among those who have spent their lives protecting that separation. The presidency, including under figures like Donald Trump, carries the constitutional role of commander-in-chief. However, being commander-in-chief does not mean owning the loyalty of the armed forces in a personal or political sense. It means exercising lawful authority within constitutional limits. The military executes legal orders regardless of which party controls the White House. This neutrality is what allows transitions of power to occur peacefully, even after bitter elections. The apolitical nature of the military is also essential for maintaining public trust. Polls over many years have consistently shown that the armed forces are among the most trusted institutions in American society. That trust depends on citizens believing that soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines serve all Americans equally, whether they voted red, blue, or not at all. If the military were perceived as aligning itself with one political ideology or leader, that trust could erode quickly. Once lost, it would be difficult to restore. For senior military leaders, protecting that neutrality is part of their professional duty. They are trained to avoid public political endorsements, campaign appearances, or statements that could be interpreted as partisan. Even after retirement, many continue to observe this tradition out of respect for the institution they served. That is why, when they express concern about political interference or perceived pressure that could compromise professional judgment, it is framed not as opposition to policy differences, but as defense of institutional norms. The military's apolitical stance also protects democracy by preventing the dangerous fusion of armed power with political ambition. In many parts of the world, history shows how fragile democracies can become when military institutions take sides in political disputes. The United States has avoided that instability largely because of its firm adherence to civilian control balanced by professional military independence in operational matters. Leaders within the armed forces are expected to provide candid advice, but once lawful decisions are made, they execute them without public political commentary. When that line appears threatened, whether through rhetoric, symbolic gestures, or actions that could politicize the uniform, alarm bells naturally ring among experienced commanders. Their concern is not about party politics. It is about preserving a structure that has prevented military involvement in partisan conflict for more than 2 centuries. Maintaining an apolitical military is not just tradition. It is a safeguard that keeps the armed forces focused on national defense rather than domestic political struggle. Another critical concern raised by military leaders in situations like this is the potential for political interference in operational decisions, which strikes at the heart of military professionalism and strategic integrity. In the armed forces, every decision, whether it's the deployment of troops, timing of operations, or allocation of resources, is ideally made based on careful analysis, intelligence, and strategic necessity. These decisions are meant to be guided by national security priorities, mission objectives, and the welfare of service members, rather than by political calculations or electoral considerations. When even the perception exists that operational choices could be influenced by political motives, it undermines confidence in the chain of command and raises serious questions about whether military leaders can execute their duties free from undue influence. The importance of this principle cannot be overstated. Military operations are often complex, high stakes, and sometimes involve life and death consequences. Leaders must be able to make rapid, precise decisions based on available facts and professional judgment. Introducing political considerations into these decisions risks compromising effectiveness, jeopardizing missions, and most importantly, endangering the lives of those serving on the front lines. Senior leaders have an ethical and professional responsibility to push back against any interference that could compromise operational integrity. Their public statements or letters in such contexts are often a reflection of deep concern that these core principles of military professionalism are under threat, even if no direct orders have been violated. Furthermore, the perception of political interference has ripple effects beyond immediate operational decisions. It can affect morale among service members, as troops may begin to question whether their missions are being guided by strategic logic or political expediency. It can also erode trust between civilian leadership and military commanders, which is essential for the smooth functioning of the Department of Defense. Civilian oversight of the military is a cornerstone of democratic governance, but that oversight must respect the professional judgment and expertise of military leaders. When this balance is disrupted, even subtly, it can create confusion, hesitation, and tension within the ranks. The history provides numerous examples where politicization of military decisions has led to disastrous outcomes. Decisions driven more by optics, political advantage, or electoral strategy than by sound military planning have historically resulted in operational failures, unintended escalation, and unnecessary casualties. Military leaders, aware of these lessons, are particularly sensitive to situations that may repeat similar mistakes. Their public warnings are therefore not a critique of individual leaders for personal reasons, but a professional alert aimed at protecting the institution and the nation. Finally, in highlighting concerns about political interference, senior military leaders also emphasize the importance of transparency and accountability. They are signaling that decisions affecting national security and military operations must be made with integrity, following established processes, and without compromise. By bringing these concerns into the public sphere, they aim to reinforce the idea that safeguarding the military's impartiality and operational independence is a matter of national interest, not partisan politics. This step underscores the seriousness with which they view any potential erosion of trust in the military's ability to execute its mission professionally and without bias. A central theme in the public statements of military leaders refusing to stand behind a political figure like Donald Trump is the unwavering principle that loyalty must be directed toward the Constitution rather than any individual. This distinction is not merely symbolic, it defines the very structure of civil-military relations in the United States. Every service member, from a newly enlisted recruit to a 4-star general, swears an oath to defend and uphold the Constitution. That oath establishes a professional and moral framework that supersedes personal allegiance to a commander-in-chief. It ensures that decisions made within the armed forces are guided by law, ethics, and national interest, rather than by personal loyalty or political favor. Senior leaders emphasizing this point are reminding the public that the military's integrity rests on its commitment to principles that endure beyond the tenure or popularity of any single leader. This focus on constitutional loyalty is particularly important in moments of heightened political tension or controversy. Presidents, regardless of party affiliation, wield significant influence over military policy and the lives of service members. However, that influence is bounded by law, ethical obligations, and the professional judgment of military leaders. By asserting that loyalty is owed to the Constitution, these leaders are reinforcing a critical safeguard against the misuse of military authority for partisan purposes. It is a declaration that the military's mission is fundamentally about protecting the nation and its democratic framework, not advancing the personal ambitions or agendas of individual office holders. Emphasizing loyalty to the Constitution also communicates to the American people that the military's decisions are rooted in enduring values rather than transient politics. This distinction preserves public trust, which is vital for maintaining the credibility and legitimacy of the armed forces. When citizens believe that the military serves the Constitution, they can have confidence that defense policies, deployments, and strategic decisions are guided by national interest rather than political expediency. Conversely, if loyalty were perceived as personal or partisan, it could undermine confidence in the military's objectivity, compromise morale among service members, and even destabilize civil-military relations. For senior leaders who have spent decades serving in uniform, this principle is not abstract, it is a lived reality. They have witnessed firsthand the consequences of decisions that align too closely with individual personalities rather than institutional norms. They understand that the strength of the US military has always derived not from personal loyalty to leaders, but from the disciplined execution of orders that are lawful, ethical, and consistent with constitutional values. By publicly stressing loyalty to the Constitution over any one individual, these leaders are reinforcing a foundational doctrine that protects the nation, preserves military professionalism, and ensures that the armed forces remain a stabilizing, a political institution in times of political division. Moreover, this emphasis serves as a subtle reminder that democratic governance depends on a clear separation between personal power and institutional responsibility. The military's role is to carry out lawful directives, offer candid advice, and maintain readiness, but it is not to become an instrument of partisan ambition. Publicly articulating this principle in extraordinary circumstances sends a clear message that the norms of service, duty, and constitutional fidelity are non-negotiable and must be respected to safeguard both national security and democracy itself. Civil-military relations form one of the most fundamental pillars of American democracy, and understanding their importance is crucial to appreciating why senior military leaders would feel compelled to issue a public statement distancing themselves from a political figure like Donald Trump. In the United States, the principle of civilian control over the military is absolute. Elected officials are responsible for setting national policy, making strategic decisions, and determining the overarching objectives for the armed forces. Yet, while civilian leaders provide direction, the military retains professional independence in executing those orders, ensuring that decisions are grounded in operational realities, expert judgment, and ethical standards. This delicate balance between civilian authority and military expertise has been the bedrock of US stability, allowing the nation to navigate conflicts, crises, and political transitions without resorting to force or undermining democratic institutions. When that balance is perceived to be at risk, it triggers alarm among senior military leaders. The letter refusing to stand behind a political figure reflects a concern that the traditional separation between politics and military execution may be eroding. If political considerations start influencing operational decisions or the impartiality of the armed forces, it can weaken the chain of command, reduce operational effectiveness, and create confusion among troops about where ultimate authority resides. Civil-military norms are designed to prevent such scenarios by making it clear that while the military serves the nation, it does not serve as a political tool. The leader's public statement is therefore not a partisan act, but a defense of these institutional safeguards that ensure the military remains a neutral, stabilizing force. Furthermore, strong civil-military relations are essential to national credibility, both domestically and internationally. Allies, adversaries, and neutral parties alike observe whether the US military operates under the consistent, predictable guidance of elected civilian leadership. Disruptions in this balance, or even the perception that the military is being politicized, can damage the country's reputation, reduce trust in joint operations with allied forces, and embolden adversaries. By speaking out, senior military figures are signaling that adherence to civil-military norms is critical not just for internal governance, but also for maintaining the nation's strategic posture and credibility on the global stage. The importance of these norms extends to domestic stability as well. Civil-military boundaries prevent the armed forces from being used to influence elections, suppress dissent, or exert undue political pressure. These boundaries have been tested in other nations, often with disastrous consequences when blurred, resulting in coups, authoritarianism, or widespread instability. In the United States, preserving these norms has allowed for peaceful transfers of power for more than 2 centuries, even in periods of intense political division. By emphasizing civil-military relations, military leaders are underscoring that these structures must remain inviolate to protect the democratic system and ensure that the military's power is exercised responsibly and lawfully. Finally, this principle reinforces the role of military leaders as guardians of the institution rather than servants of any particular political agenda. They provide expert counsel to civilian leaders, execute lawful directives, and maintain readiness for national defense, but they do not take sides in partisan disputes. By highlighting the importance of civil, military norms in their public statement, these leaders are sending a clear message: the strength, professionalism, and credibility of the U.S. armed forces depend on an unwavering commitment to institutional integrity, respect for lawful civilian authority, and the careful preservation of the separation between politics and military service.